Hi there, Sugar Snaps. Welcome back to the studio. If you're new here, welcome in. My name's Brittany. I'm the creator behind this channel. And today I'm doing a little bit of tub dyeing using fiber reactive dyes. I'm using Dharma Trading Company fiber reactive dyes. And I decided to hop on here and do a little quick tutorial on how I do my tub dyeing. Tub dyeing being dyeing a garment or some sort of material in a bin or tub of water, one solid color, rather than ice dyeing or tie dyeing or some other kind of dyeing technique doing one solid color. So there are quite a few different ways to do tub dyeing. You can find different instructions online. I did a little bit of research just to see some different processes that people go through. Today I want to share my process for tub dyeing using fiber reactive dyes because I have set up a system for myself where I dye materials in a dye bath that then I can refresh and use again and again if I'm using the same color, instead of dumping the dye out once I've dyed one garment or however many garments I'm doing. And I can also dye one garment without feeling bad about having a huge bin of dye once I've done so. I do a lot of one-off pieces rather than large batches of pieces, so being able to dye something quickly without wasting dye powder is really valuable to me. So I've developed this system. I'm still experimenting with it, so it's not perfected, but this is how I do my dyeing with fiber reactive dyes when I'm trying to dye something a solid color. So the process we'll be going through is creating a soda ash bath, which is using soda ash, which is a dye fixer, soaking your material in that soda ash bath for 15 minutes up to a day, 24 hours, to prepare the fiber to take on as much dye as possible so that it's as vibrant and saturated as possible. And then we'll create a dye bath using fiber reactive dyes and put the pre-treated fiber into that dye bath. And then we'll save both the soda ash bath and our dye bath for future projects, whether that's leaving it in your bin if you have space to store it in your tub or your bin. In my studio, I have the luxury of being able to have a dyeing station so I can keep my soda ash bath ready to go. If you don't have that kind of space, getting milk jugs or juice bottles or some sort of plastic container that you can pour the excess soda ash bath and the excess dye bath into to save for later is a great way to store those. You can store them outside in a shed, in the garage, somewhere that they won't be tampered with, that no kids can reach, but that you can use again in the future. Okay, so the first step that you want to do when tub dyeing is to pre-wash your fabric. And today I'm doing this. This is wet because I just pulled it out of the washing machine. I'm doing this little tank top tunic dress thing. This is my sister's. I've had it in my studio for months and she's waiting for me to dye it. So I decided to go for it and dye it today. So we're going to be dyeing it a moss green or Dharma Trading Company's Muir green. So the reason you pre-wash your fabric, fiber, whatever it is that you're dyeing is that you want to remove any sizing, any finishes that are applied to the garment at the factory, or to remove any dirt or grease or even your hands have oils on them. So handling it too much is probably not a good idea before you put it in the soda ash and the dye bath. You want to pre-wash it so that it has done any shrinking that it's going to do and it's clean and the surface area of the fibers can take on as much dye pigment as possible. So I've done that. I put it through the washing machine. You can use a specific detergent for pre-washing your items that you're going to dye. I just put it through a normal wash with my normal laundry detergent. And now it's time to create a soda ash bath so we can pre-treat this garment before adding it to a dye bath. When working with soda ash, I highly suggest wearing gloves. I like to use these kitchen work gloves or dishwashing gloves and a mask. I suggest an N95 mask. I have just a dust mask here, just avoiding breathing the particles of the soda ash and then later the dye powders will, your lungs will be a lot happier, and the more time you spend using these materials, the more likely it is that it would affect you negatively. If you want more on how to dye in a safe manner, check out my post, Natural Dyeing Safety. I'll put the link in the description below. It's specific to natural dyeing, but a lot of the things apply to using chemical dyes like fiber reactive dyes. So check that out so that you keep yourself safe, keep the people around you safe, and the environment as healthy as possible. Okay, so we are going to add soda ash to this bin of water. And this is a bin that I have already pre-treated with soda ash. I've used it for a garment already. So this is something that I've saved, and I'm going to refresh it with another batch of soda ash, allow that to dissolve into the water, and then soak my new garment in there. It is suggested that you use 2 cups of soda ash per gallon of water, and that suggestion comes from Dharma Trading Company. They have instructions on their website on how to use fiber reactive dyes for tub dyeing. They suggest 2 cups per gallon of water. I found that I don't usually need 2 cups of soda ash when I'm dyeing, especially tub dyeing, because one, if I use that amount, the ratio, it doesn't seem to balance itself out. I end up with lots of granules of the soda ash at the bottom of my bin, and using that amount of soda ash feels exorbitant because you end up using a lot of soda ash for one item, which is why I like saving my soda ash baths for future projects because I can refresh them. So what I've been doing is actually adding half as much soda ash as is required when I create my initial soda ash bath, and then cutting that in half again when I go to refresh. So this is 4 gallons of water. I put 4 cups of soda ash in to begin with. Now I've used it already, and I'm going to be putting in a new garment, so I'm going to add another 2, maybe 3 cups of soda ash to this to refresh it. So to do that, I'm going to put my mask on, put my gloves on, and use my measuring cup to measure out this powder. Another quick note on dyeing safety. Make sure to use tools that you only use for dyeing. You can cross-contaminate chemical and natural dyes if you want to, but don't use your dyeing tools in your kitchen to cook with. I have special measuring cups and spoons and bins and stir spoons and pots that are specifically set aside for dyeing so that I don't cause any health problems with the cross-contamination between food and dye products. Okay, so I'm going to measure out my soda ash. Let's call that 3. Once you've poured it into your water, you can take off your safety equipment and stir this up until the granules have fully dissolved. This may take some time to dissolve, so you can stir it up and then walk away and let it dissolve some more before adding your fabric. Okay, so let's talk about what you would do if you're starting out making a soda ash bath, or if you're trying to refresh your own bath. You'll want to know how many gallons of water you're using, and then from there you can calculate either 2 cups of the soda ash per gallon, or split that in half like I do and just do 1 cup per gallon. And then once you've established your initial soda ash bath and you've used it once, then you'll refresh it using half as much soda ash as you used the first time. So for me, I did 1 cup per gallon of water. I now am doing half a cup per gallon of water, so I end up adding 2 cups of soda ash for 4 gallons of water. I'll add some notes in the description below for reference on the calculations and the measurements so that you can create your own soda ash bath. While we're waiting for the soda ash to dissolve in our bin, I wanted to put in a quick note on this system of using a soda ash bath multiple times. I haven't tested how many times I can do this before the soda ash bath starts to maybe go bad or not get the effects or the dye quality that I want from my process, but I'm estimating, just based on the color of my water at this point, which kind of murky with the soda ash in here, that I can do maybe 4 to 5 garments cycle through my soda ash bath before I maybe need to start a fresh bath. But that's something that I'm going to continue to be experimenting with, and I encourage you to experiment with as well. How many garments or pieces of fabric or items can you put through your soda ash bath before it starts to change colors or smell bad or whatever variables there are that can affect your soda ash bath? Okay, I'm ready to add my garment to the soda ash bath. It looks like most of the granules have dissolved. Well, actually, I can't see into the bath. It's really murky, but I can feel at the bottom. There's a little bit of grittiness, but I think I've gotten most of the particles to dissolve in here. So I've given that a good stir, and now I'm going to dip this in and submerge it under the water. And now it'll sit in here for a minimum of 15 minutes. I've found that if you leave your garment in the soda ash overnight, I get even brighter, more vibrant colors. Well, not brighter, but more vibrant colors from my dye. So my suggestion, if you have the time, would be to leave it in for 24 hours. At first, coming back and stirring it up, moving the fabric around to make sure that the soda ash is applying to the surface of the fabric as evenly as possible. And then if you need to go to bed or whatever, to make up that 24 hours, you can just make sure to stir it up before you leave it and then spread it out as much as possible and let it soak for multiple hours until you're ready to do your dyeing. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon right now. I'm going to let this rest. I'll come back probably tomorrow morning and transfer it, create a dye bath and transfer it to the dye bath. So I will see you tomorrow. Good morning. It's the second day of having soaked this top. So it's been about 24 hours, a little bit less. And now I'm ready to squeeze out the excess soda ash bath. I'm not going to rinse it out. I'm just going to squeeze out the excess liquid and set it aside while I create my dye bath. So to do that, I suggest wearing gloves so that you don't have your hands in the soda ash mixture, because this mixture is caustic and can dry out your hands and bother your skin if you have sensitive skin. So I'll squeeze this out and then set this aside here for when I do my dye bath. I'm going to use this jar to create a dye paste. So I'll scoop out some water from my dye bath. And this is just a pot of room temperature water. So I'm going to create a dye paste by adding powder to this jar of water and then adding the paste up dye to my dye pot. But before I open the dye powder, I'm going to make sure to have on my dust mask and gloves, and I'm going to wear my apron because I don't want it getting on my clothes. You can also wear safety glasses if you don't want to accidentally splash dye into your face. I've never done that, so I don't usually wear safety glasses when I'm doing my dye projects. I just happen to be wearing my glasses today, so there's that added protection. But if you have read through my post on natural dye safety, I do add glasses and a couple other things to wear just to make sure that you're 100% as safe as you can be. For the ratio of fabric to dye to the amount of water you're using, you check the description below. I'll put some notes down there on the ratios. Typically, if you're using 1 pound of fabric, which I don't quite have a pound of fabric. Actually, I didn't weigh this when it was dry. You want to weigh your material when it's dry and then use that number to calculate out how much dye powder you use, how much water you use. And then also we're going to add non-iodized salt to our dye bath in order to help the dye adhere to the fabric. So look in the description below for suggested ratios or suggested weights to measurements. So I have about 1.5 gallons of water here. I'm going to do a tablespoon of dye powder and 1.5 cups of salt. So I'll go ahead and add the salt in right now so it can start to dissolve. So then stir the salt in until it's dissolved. Okay, now to making our dye paste. Put on your dust mask and your gloves, and then you're going to measure out your powder into your little jar of water and mix that up until the dye powder has dissolved in your little jar. Once that's dissolved, you can add it into your pot of water. Okay, and then stir this up to combine the salt water and the dye liquid. And then we'll lift this in. I'm going to open this up. Try to get all the creases out of it. And then I'll set this into my dye pot. Now you'll allow the fabric to rest in the dye pot for up to 15 minutes if you want a lighter color, a max of probably an hour. Now, to make sure that these air bubbles are pressed out and the material is under the water all the way, you can just press them down, or you can put something heavy, a weight of some sort on top, like a mesh screen with a weight on top of it, to hold that fabric down. And then every 5 minutes or so, depending on how long you're intending to leave it in the water, you'll want to come and stir things around so that all areas of the fabric are getting dyed evenly. So here's how we're doing so far. I'll just lift this out and dunk it up and down a few times. And then I'll put something on top to weight it down. So I'm going to put this bowl on top here and press it down and put something heavy into the bowl so that it presses the fabric down under the surface of the dye. Now allow your material to dye in the dye bath for 15 minutes to an hour, making sure to come back every couple minutes and give it a stir, move things around, and then we'll come back and pull it out, rinse it out, and see the finished product. Okay, so I pulled this out, squeezed out the excess water, and now I'm going to go rinse it in the sink to rinse out any excess dye, and then I'll throw it through the washer and dryer on a gentle cycle to wash out, again, any of the excess dye after rinsing, and then dry it to see the final color. And I'm thinking this will probably fade a bit once I remove the excess dye, and as a dry fabric, it's going to look a bit lighter. Right now, it looks very dark. A lot darker than I was going for. So we'll see how this turns out. So let's go do that. Okay, while we wait for my garment to come out of the washer and dryer, let's talk about how to preserve your dye bath so you can use it again. Now, I am going to put mine into these containers here. I have these, I don't really know what they were, but these containers with screw-on lids. You can use milk jugs or juice bottles, a 2-liter bottle, something with a screw on top that you can store in a basement or a garage or somewhere out of the way but closed tightly so that it won't evaporate away. Now, a quick safety note on this: if you have kids in your household or kids around, I highly suggest putting these somewhere that the kids can't get to them, because you don't want anyone drinking this or spilling it everywhere, getting it on themselves. Yeah, definitely store these somewhere that are not accessible to the littles in your life to keep them safe. I wanted to jump in here really quick and just say that I've only ever saved fiber reactive dye baths because they don't need heat, so they never change temperature. Once you add the water to your pot and you add the dye bath or the dye powder and then your garment, and you take your garment out, the whole time it's the same temperature. You're not adding heat or adding cold or anything, and therefore there's no chemical reaction happening due to a heat change. So the dye bath essentially stays the same, other than what you're adding into the dye bath with whatever's on the fabric. So a little bit of soda ash probably ends up in the dye bath if you've soaked your garment or your material in a soda ash bath first. But otherwise, it stays pretty much the same through the entire dye process. Whereas a heat dye, you're heating it up and there's a chemical reaction that happens on the fiber between the dye and the fiber. And therefore, I don't think it would work as a second or third or fourth or a reuse exhaust bath the same way that a fiber reactive dye would. So I only do this with fiber reactive dyes, and that is why. So for these, I'm going to transfer this into this pot of liquid into these containers just by pouring it over. This is probably a good idea to have a buddy for this process, so they can hold your container while you're pouring over, or do this over a sink so that you don't spill too much onto your surface. I apparently like to live dangerously, so I'm just going for it. I'm going to screw this on nice and tight and do the other one. And then once we've poured the liquid into the container, ooh, that's what I meant, don't spill everywhere. Once it's poured into these containers, then you'll want to put some sort of label. I'll just mark on these with a Sharpie to make sure that I label what color these are, because I have lots of projects going, and you probably do too. And if you're anything like me, in about a week, you won't have any idea what it was you were dyeing, what color this was, all that jazz. So make a note of the color of the dye you were using. So I was using Mirror Green. I'll take my Sharpie and just put a little note on here. Mirror Green. I might need a bigger Sharpie. Use the jumbo Sharpie instead. Mirror Green. I'll put the date as well as how much salt I put into this bath. So I put in 2 cups salt between the 2 baths, and then 1 tablespoon dye powder. And I'm putting on what I put into my dye bath originally, knowing that this is an exhaust bath. So I'll add that note as well. This is an exhaust bath, which means that it's been used once, and if I want to reuse it again, I probably need to refresh it with more dye powder and possibly more salt as well. Okay, and then I need the date on here. So it is February 2022. I'll just put the month in the year. Okay, and then these are ready to store for my next dye project. You can do the same with your soda ash bath. I'm going to be doing some more dyeing in the near future, so I'm just going to leave my soda ash bath in this bin. You can do that as well if you have somewhere out of the way that you can store it. Again, away from where your family members or kids can get into it, because it is a low-level toxic substance. It's caustic, so you don't want anyone playing with it thinking that it's just a bin of water. And that's how to use fiber reactive dyes on plant fibers, so cotton, hemp, bamboo, linen, those kinds of things, with a soda ash pre-wash or pre-bath before you throw your garment into the dye. I will show you my finished garment as soon as it comes out of the dryer to show you the results. It came out of the dye bath very dark, so I'm interested to see how much that fades with the wash and the dry cycle. Thanks so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you're new here and have yet to subscribe, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get notified whenever I put out a new video. I put out a video about once a week on fiber art of some sort, usually a basketry, natural dyeing, spinning, dyeing tutorial, or project work along, or something like that. So subscribe so you get notified whenever I put out a new video. Like this video to support my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Don't forget to watch till the end to see the reveal of the garment, but I will see you next time. Bye. Here is the dyed garment. Mine turned out pretty modeled. You can see there's kind of a pattern of design here where the dye didn't equally distribute over the fabric, and this is probably because I left it in for quite a while and I didn't stir it super consistently after the first 15 minutes. So if you want something that's more of a solid color, like up here we got more of the solid color, then stir your material in the dye bath very consistently, maybe constantly, to make sure that the fabric ends up a solid color. I'm really happy with how this turned out because there's some cool designs and it just adds nice dimension to this summery dress. But if you want something solid, that would be the solution, is to stir it regularly.